Guts, shaken, runs away from the guards. His sword is bloodied by royal blood. His flight is that of an assassin in the night, with a hood over his face and a murderous intent. The life of a potential throne heir had been taken, and more importantly, a young soul was stolen away from this world. In his dream, after escaping the bloodied scene and the guards, and falling in the sewers, Guts sees his younger self with his father figure, Gambino. A monster cuts down Gambino and then Guts himself. The gigantic beast turns out to have a terrifying face, yet a very familiar one, that of Guts. The beast was the psychological state of his ego at the moment, devilishly smiling with sharp and shark-like teeth, monstrous yet humanous hands with long claws and massive horns. It is an image of a demon. What led to that development to such a self-image? Guts had killed many men, but now he vividly sees himself as such an abomination after killing a child. Child Guts grew under the care of a ruthless band of mercenaries, where he was taught that in order to eat and live, you need to be strong enough to kill and take. Under the banner of Griffith, Guts naturally continued living by this philosophy, yet a particular desire led his actions as well. Desire for closeness and friendship. For those reasons, Guts unquestionably follows Griffith's commands, culminating in honorless assassination. Guts didn't see it in a wrong light because his worldview was skewed. For him, the presented task of assassinating Count Julius was a welcome duty to Griffith, his leader and friend. However, Guts' life philosophy starts to change with the accidental death of Adonis, the Count's son, and his own dreamy image of a scary beast. Guts is a trained killer. There was no question in mind if he would be fit for the task of killing royalty, the brother of a king nonetheless, in a heavily guarded castle. Griffith could definitely only trust Guts with it, and Guts was eager to follow his command. An assassination entailed a very important task, though the face of the assassin must never be seen. A failure of that clause was unacceptable, because the hirer could be traced back. When he arrives to scout the Count's place, he watches a sparring between him and his son Adonis unfold. Weirdly, Guts has a flashback to himself and Gambino. Guts' first reaction to Count Julius' harshness towards his son is to compare it to Gambino. Gambino never ever let Guts off the hook and played nicely with him. It was all ruthless lessons which were taught by beating and cutting with the sword. The world meant money and only the strong survived. Guts quickly tries to reconcentrate again on the assassination. After that, Guts successfully kills Julius. However, his face was uncovered by the clinging royalty, seeing Guts before his last breath. Unfortunately, someone comes into the room in the vulnerable state. Guts' face is visible. He acts instantly and neutralizes whoever opened the door and could alarm the guards. The job was done. The Count was killed. And the sacredness of the killer's face was kept hidden and protected. To Guts' surprise, the intruder was Adonis, the child of Count Julius. The killing of a child and the sight of it heavily affected our protagonist assassin. It disturbs his concentration as well as his psyche. The helpless expression of a dying child and the innocent tears of suffering and pain. The outstretching hands of a little soul searching for help. Everyone has been a child, and that knowledge and sense about innocence doesn't quite disappear in grown-up humans. Guts is pressed by time and the oncoming guards to flee as soon as possible before quite gathering his thoughts in a coherent manner. Shot in the back by an arrow and falling in the sewers, he passes out. In a dream, child Guts is again together with Gambino, and then both are slain by a monster with the face of grown-up Guts. What did that mean? Carl Jung, a psychiatrist, understood the dream of a childlike self to be an archetypal image of the inner child. It could be a possible invitation to delve deeper into the past and a trauma and to reconnect with it in order to deal with it. An interesting thing to point out is the fact from which perspective the ego observes in the dream. The ego is the eyes we look through in dreams. It is our identity and our sense of self. In Guts' dream, it could be suggested that Guts saw himself through the eyes of the monstrosity that killed Gambino and his child self. Which means that Guts consciously viewed himself as a monster, which not only killed a child, but awoke a buried trauma. It is a complex trauma from Guts' childhood and his understanding of death, parental care and innocence. Guts' psyche could have possibly seen the killing of Adonis as a cycle of meaningless war and the perishment of children. Him being a victim then, and now being a monster responsible for similar atrocities that were committed to him. Guts was physically exhausted and mentally torn. Guts, returning to Griffith and hearing his speech about the dream, makes the first step towards maturity. The goal was to try and find something of meaning, and for a good cause, as Guts understood, to become a true friend of Griffith. Though it was again caused by childish desires, such as that to be like your friend, it is a step forwards in the personal development of Guts, yet, as we all know, a very fatal one of the whole story of Berserk. Guts felt ashamed, troubled, and monstrously ill after unintentionally killing Julius's child. The complex thing to understand is that an earthquake happened on the unconscious level. Carl Jung judged dreams to be important messages from the unconscious to the individual, as we see with Guts in Berserk after committing such a crime. It is multifaceted and difficult to understand, but a good indicator of what's bothering you and how you perceive yourself. The assassination turned Guts into an apostle, a monster. It is a traumatic experience which calls forth buried trauma from the past. In that moment, we see an inspired self-projection within Guts of an unstoppable force of death and destruction. It is one of the most human reflections at the start of the manga, and a very beautiful contrast to Griffith, for example, who never saw himself as a monster, only as a hero. That is all to say that this one event, the murder of a child, was one of many unfortunate and terrible events that would shape the monster in Guts, and probably, by extension, the beast of darkness.